Welcome back, everybody. It's December 16th, 2018, 11:11 p.m., and we have some pretty solid breaking news coming out of Indonesia. Once again, these poor people cannot seem to catch a break as far as the Ring of Fire activity, whether that be earthquakes or volcanoes. 120 active volcanoes in the area alone. But there's something quite unique about this situation. Now, if you guys remember back on September 28th, there was a large, shallow 7.5 earthquake that struck and caused a tsunami that took the lives of over 2,000 people. Now, this was in Sulawesi, Indonesia. The tsunami was caused in Palu. That was where most of the damage was, and the reason for the high loss of life count was because the tsunami warning was lifted about 34 minutes after the quake itself, and then the tsunami hit. So that was a very, very horrible situation. And then 5 days later, as more data was processed from that September 28th date, they determined by October 3rd, which was about 5 days later, that it was the direct cause of Mount Soputan volcano to erupt, which is what also erupted today twice. So this is a third eruption of this volcano, major eruption, since basically October 3rd until now, which is very significant, especially with all the activity going on, especially on the west coast of the Pacific Ring of Fire. And we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, and to see this volcano erupt once again with a few pretty strong earthquakes surrounding it, including a, this would be a 5.8 right off the west coast of Australia here. This was today, and then the bigger of the two in Indonesia itself, a little bit closer to where that volcano we're talking about is. We had a 6.1 at 61.1 kilometers in depth, so fairly significant earthquake right there, right along the Ring of Fire. Although this quake is not considered in the Ring of Fire, it is close enough to where it could be a cause and effect from the movement and the pressure release from the volcano itself. So, with that said, this was a little bit of the aftermath of that tsunami, which you could see just completely devastated the area near Palu, Indonesia. And a little bit of stats here. Survivors ride past debris in a devastated area in Palu in central Sulawesi on October 1st, 2018, after a 7.5 magnitude earthquake and tsunami hit the area on September 28th. So that is how they made the connection and basically determined that the initial 7.5 shallow earthquake was the cause of the eruption afterwards. So with that said, moving on here, I want to get into what happened today. So here we go. These are some images and some information about the eruptions that went on today. This was a daytime shot after the initial eruption, and then a second one was followed later as night fell. As you can see here, the lava at the top of the cap of this volcano here. Pretty incredible pictures. The main issue, obviously, with a lot of these volcano situations is the dust and not breathing it in. You can clearly see here that the dust and stuff has been settling on cars, on the roads. They've been doing cleanups. I don't know if that's due to the earthquake itself or the eruption shaking from the volcano, but surely Indonesia is going through a lot these days, and being on the Ring of Fire, which has been showing an uptick in major activity over the last few months, and not only that, but even few years. We've just been breaking records left and right with the amount of 4.5 and higher quakes, and the noticing of higher quakes being downgraded for whatever reason. So we have a lot of major movement going on, is what I'm trying to say. When we check the buoys here, which are sensor buoys that usually read Earth's movement when it comes to earthquakes or volcanoes, you could see none of them are really going off at the moment. None of these are really that close to where the major earthquake and the volcano were, so that is understandable, but I always like to check this chart just in case. Let's see. Now, as far as this 6.1 quake, again, not too close to where the volcano is, which is right in this area here. I believe right around here is the area of the volcano that we're speaking of. So it may not have been caused by this quake, but just the overall idea here is that the western part of the Pacific has just been completely blowing up. And if you switch the setting to the last 30 days of 4.5 and higher quakes, you could just see that the west side here is just loaded with them. These are volcanic eruptions, these are earthquakes, and this is over the last 30 days. So, yes, I know that's a long time, that's 30 days of quakes, but these are all 4.5 and higher. So, when you see something like this, and I've talked about this in the past, as you move up to Alaska, of course, we had our big Anchorage quake. We had a large quake up in the northern part of Alaska even earlier before this 30-day mark here. So this would have been on this chart had it been within the last 30 days. Again, directly related to the Anchorage quake, Alaska is definitely moving around these days, and we are starting to see movement moving down into the west coast of the U.S., which seems to be the only area not being hit by any of these major quakes. We have had some close calls with the fours with California over the last couple days, but nothing really breaking that 4.5 as you would see them here, except for right down here in the Baja California area. And then it kind of skips that area and then regenerates as it follows the fault line on the east coast of the Pacific. So it does raise questions. It's like, why are these quakes not hitting this area? I mean, thank God they're not, but it just makes you, it puts you on the edge of your seat to make you think that this might be next, you know. And the last thing I try to do is instill fear into anybody. I don't predict earthquakes. I don't get into that type of stuff. I mean, there are some things you can look at from other quakes that will give you an idea of what to expect in the near future. I always mention Dutch Sense. Wonderful, amazing forecaster when it comes to earthquakes. He is the go-to man. But again, I love covering this stuff on my channel, so I will continue to do so. But it just looks like it's just skipping right over this area, and these steps here, I always call them the steps. This is the area we're going to want to look out for. Of course, the fault lines in California are very important to pay attention to, but this fault line here seems to be the topic of conversation among the bigger earthquake channels that study this stuff. They're expecting some a very near future quake to hit this area and cause some issues, let's say, for even possibly Washington, Oregon, and or California, basically anywhere on the west coast of the U.S. So clearly an uptick in activity, whether it be earthquakes or volcanoes, along the western part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, and that just adds to our last couple weeks of videos. We've been talking about one 7.0 quake after another, it seems to be, and they've been downgrading them. So the initial reports are very high, and then a couple hours passes and they downgrade them. So your guess is as good as mine as to why they do that, but nonetheless, very important information to pay attention to, because one of these quakes could be big enough to cause a wave that will cross the entire Pacific Ocean and head towards the west coast of the U.S., or even Anchorage, Alaska. We get another big one in this area, that could produce a wave that could affect areas of the western U.S. So these are not things we should take lightly, guys. We need to pay attention to this type of stuff. Most of the time, if not ever, you don't see this on the news unless you live in these countries or these areas, which is unfortunate in itself, but that's why we have channels like myself, like Dutch Sense, plenty others out there, so that's why we're here. But okay, so let's see what else we got here. In fact, that's about it. So real quick, I'll just show you here on Google Earth the orientation of what we're seeing here. So the 6.1 magnitude quake in Indonesia was right here in this area, so pretty significantly far away from where the Soputan volcano is, which I'll show you right here. This is the one that we've been talking about that went off on October 3rd after a 7.5 earthquake and tsunami struck in the area close to this. So we had an eruption then, and then, like I said, 2 eruptions today alone with this volcano. So major activity going on all over Indonesia, very close to Australia. And like I said, within this area alone, there's over 120 active volcanoes which release pressure just as earthquakes do. These are pressure releases, guys, pressure transfers that causes earthquakes, and then volcanoes also release pressure in the same way. So these things are connected. There's no doubt about it. They may not talk about it in the scientific world as far as mainstream science, but the evidence is there. So we are going to follow the evidence and the data, and that's how we are going to make our adjustments and adjust our videos to, figure out exactly what's going on here. But bottom line is the west coast of the Ring of Fire is firing up and has been for a while now. So what is there to expect next is the question. Are we going to get something major on the west side, or are we finally going to see something devastating happening on the east side of the Pacific, which would put the U.S. at risk? So with that said, guys, that is the video for right now. I'm still working on the second half of that weather video, as the weather keeps changing so much that it's hard to keep up. So I want to keep you guys up to date as much as possible, and that will be the next time we talk. So hope everyone's well. I hope you have a good night. It is 11:37 now. It is still Sunday, December 16th, about to be the 17th, and I hope everyone has a great night, great early morning, you name it. And thank you, Caroline. She was the one that sent me all the great links to follow for this one, so you guys give her a big thanks down in the comments section, as she's home busy shopping, doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now. But shh, don't tell her that. Anyway, guys, have a great night. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.